Hey everybody, hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Automatic CSS Live. D123 is in the house. We got Larry, we got Manny, Eric, DD, Darius, Ross, Kevin, Paige, Marcus, David. Welcome everybody. Love it. This is one of my favorite places to be. Hey everybody, hold on. We're gonna get the double. We're gonna get the double audio coming in. Gotta shut that off. We got a lot of new faces in the house, which is really, really good. This is like one of my favorite places to be and to spend my time with the ACSS community. Don't tell the WDD live people, you know what I'm saying? No, I love both. I love both live streams. Lots and lots of fun. Today, what we're doing, just a little agenda, get it out of the way. Agenda and news. Agenda for today is Automatic CSS, more focused on beginners, beginner level kind of questions, okay? What's the difference between a beginner question and an intermediate question? If you don't know, go ahead and ask the question. I'll let you know, hey, that's a little too advanced for this live stream. We're gonna keep it more toward the basic stuff. We are going to, I guess this, frames. Okay, this will also not cover frames, okay? So this kind of segues into the new plan, the new schedule, because there's a few different audiences, okay? And it's just better to not combine all of these live streams together. Yes, it takes more of my time, more of my focus to do it this way, but it's ultimately better for users. We will do a beginner live stream once a month. So Automatic CSS beginner live stream once a month. We will do an Automatic CSS advanced live stream once a month. So that's 2 live streams per month. And then we will do a frames specific live stream once a month. So that's 3 live streams a month and then 1 week off. Maybe some weeks, I don't know. There will be the beginner and the advanced and the same. It's gonna depend on my schedule really and what else is going on. But that's the commitment right now is 1 beginner live stream, 1 advanced live stream, 1 frames specific live stream. And we'll do that every single month. Ruben says, don't forget to like the stream. That is correct. Throw up those likes. Andrea says, good morning from Swanee, Georgia. I met up with Andrea. Andrea is on my team. He normally resides in Italy, and he is actually in Atlanta. And I met up with him yesterday, and it was absolutely fantastic. He has a lovely family, and he's as awesome in person as he is online, and always kicking ass and taking names for our team, which I really love and appreciate. And he's been on the team for a long time now, and it's just awesome to have him. Okay, so we are going to, I think, just dive right in. We talked about the schedule. There's really, as you guys know, Automatic CSS 2.6 is now out and live. The Automatic CSS website is revamped and live and online. If you want to do an inside out look at the new Automatic CSS website, I will be doing a deep dive on it tomorrow on WDD Live over on my other channel, geary.co. We'll be looking at the front end, obviously, but then I will take you into the back end because there's a lot of people who want to know how is everything set up in the back end, what's the architecture look like, all that good stuff. We'll talk about all that. I'll answer all of your questions about the new Automatic CSS website. Okay, we need to dive right in. So if you have a question, go ahead and put question in all caps. Then go ahead and ask your question. I'm going to scroll up and just see if there's any questions that were posted at the very beginning. I actually don't think, it's not, I saw a couple, but inside of Ecamm, it's not letting me access the ones that occurred before the stream started. And I can't pull up the live video because then our audio is gonna cross. So go ahead and put those new ones in. I'm gonna go ahead and screen share and get everything going and ready for everybody. I'm gonna go back here to the dashboard. Okay, perfect. All right, question from Eric. Can you talk a bit about Pro Mode, what it is, and why when one would use it? Yes, okay, fantastic question. I'm gonna put that up on the screen right here. So, Pro Mode is one of the features that is asked about a lot. I'm gonna go over and check it out in the options panel. If we scroll down here, you are gonna see, I'm gonna zoom in. you're going to see framework settings, a whole framework settings panel. And then you can see a bunch of different areas of the framework that can be turned off. And what's really important to understand here is that when you turn a piece of the framework off from here, like our margin classes or padding classes, that is going to remove those classes from the style sheets, which means that those if you use those classes now, the styles for them will not be rendered anymore. This also means that those classes are not loaded. Therefore, it's going to lighten the weight of your website. But the variables that are associated with these classes, for example, the spacing variables, those are left on, those are left active. And so you can still hook in, you can still apply margin using Automatic CSS. You can't just use the margin utility classes, but you can go in to the margin input field and type var space m and get medium spacing for margin. You still are able to use Automatic CSS. You can't just use the utility classes. Now, what is the benefit of this? Okay, well, first let's talk about Pro Mode. So if I hit activate right here, what you're gonna see is that a bunch of these framework areas are turned off by default. Which ones and why? Okay, this basically follows my personal philosophy for using utility classes. Background classes are left on. Section padding classes are left on. If we ask ourselves, why is this? Then you're going to start to understand Pro Mode versus like a utility first philosophy, okay? So background classes are something you want to use on the fly. Like, you know, a section could be, we don't actually, it doesn't matter what the content in the section is. This section has a section before it and a section after it. Therefore, I want its background to be a different color. And so I might change the color like from white to base light or base ultra light or something like that. And even if I use that section on a different part of the website, it doesn't mean necessarily that I want that same background color. It really depends on what's above it and what's below it, right? Because if there's a base light section above it already, I don't want this one to be base light too. I want to change it to something else. So I want to remove base light and throw another class on there and make it a different background color. I want to be able to do this on the fly, make these decisions on the fly based on what's before or what's after certain content. Same thing with section padding classes. Sometimes I just want a section to have more block padding in it. No rhyme or reason. It's just in this particular layout, that's what's going to look good. So I'm able to throw a section padding class on there and I'm able to change the block padding like that. Very, very easy. Why would margin classes and padding classes and well, owl spacing's deprecated now, but margin and padding classes, why would those be turned off? Because typically in these situations, I mean, margin is first of all, margin is becoming more and more, or I would say less and less useful, right? We have gap that we're primarily using in all of these places. So you used to go like margin bottom, margin bottom, margin bottom, margin bottom, or margin top, margin top, margin. These utility classes you could throw in there very quick. But what ends up happening is you're littering utility classes everywhere. Now we have things like, gap, we have automatic, contextual spacing. We have things that automatically handle this stuff in a much more maintainable, scalable fashion and efficient fashion. So these classes just aren't as useful anymore. And then what you often find yourself doing is putting a margin class on something that should probably already be like a global element of some sort, like with a BEM class. Like you should be using a custom class in that situation. And so the margin classes are just, for me, not that useful anymore. I would rather attach my styling to a BEM class, and that's how I prefer to work. So I'm primarily working with variables in Automatic CSS. I'm not primarily working with utility classes. ACSS is not a utility class or a utility first framework. Like Tailwind is a utility first framework. The philosophy is use utility classes for everything. Anything and everything, you should use a utility class. Automatic CSS is actually the opposite of that. Automatic CSS says use BEM custom classes with variables so that you are tokenizing everything, and then use utility classes very sparingly, knowing that utility classes are not very maintainable because you're having to litter them all over these different areas. Okay, so that's kind of a long-winded explanation. If you're following my approach of BEM classes and variables, then you should turn off as many utility groups as possible, because you're lightening the framework dramatically. You're working more in a more scalable, maintainable fashion. But if you love utility classes and you don't have a problem with littering utility classes everywhere, and you are building sites where you're like, I want raw speed, I don't really care all that much about, maximum maintainability and scalability, then maybe you don't want to use Pro Mode. Maybe you want to just have all these utility classes on and you want to use them all over the place. If we look at something like Breakout classes, this is a very light part of the framework. There's not a lot behind the scenes, like a lot of bloat or anything behind the scenes. And so some of these things is like, could I break out an element with a BEM class? Well, yeah, I could. I don't know if most people could, like without looking up how to do it. And so it's more efficient to just leave that on because it doesn't add a lot of bloat. And when you need it, you can just pop it on and it's done. And you don't have to know how to break out an element. You can just use the class, right? So that's why that one stays on. So the decision is like, should that technique be used with a BEM class? And then there's one more layer to that, which is, but would people know how to do it if the class wasn't available? And so this one stays on because most people don't know how to do this without the class. So we leave that one on. Look at like grid classes, perfect example, like whipping grids up all over the place. Sometimes you want grid to be attached to a custom class, okay? But there's a lot of times where you don't need it to be attached to a custom class. So there is a good use case for grid utility classes, which is why those stay on. Same thing for gap. You want to be able to adjust gaps on the fly. So those classes stay on. Flexbox classes. This one is either or. On a lot of sites, I turn these off. There's a lot of weight in the Flexbox classes because these are all of the alignment, justify, all of those are in this package as well. Strong case that you should probably be using BEM in most of these situations. And so a lot of sites, I turn it off. However, for Pro Mode, to be nice to, the biggest group of users, I decided to leave that on. But I personally go turn this off on a lot of sites. If I'm using Flexbox stuff, I'm almost always attaching that to a custom class. Width classes, you want to be able to adjust widths on the fly. I did a whole video on like sculpting content widths with width classes. So this is really helpful to have those on. So you see the thought process, right? The thought process is like, should that be done with BEM or should that primarily be done with utility classes? If the answer is primarily should be done with with BEM, then it's turned off. And that's really the logic behind Pro Mode. Now, the good thing about Pro Mode is you can literally activate it. It's going to turn this stuff off. And then if you decide, oh, there's a part of Pro Mode, like maybe aspect ratio classes. You just love your aspect ratio classes, okay? And you're like, why did it turn it off? I want well, it's no problem. You can just go turn that one back on. See, I'm still using Pro Mode, but it's like a customized version of Pro Mode. You can turn on and off. Nothing is gonna, there's no breaking change here, right? If you use classes and then you turn them off, it will break your design. But if you turn them back on, everything will come back. So it's not like an unrecoverable thing. You're free to toggle these on and off. It's very safe. If you notice something broke, then either replace those things with a custom class or just go turn that thing back on. I will say this, don't go build a whole site and then be like, I'm gonna turn on Pro Mode. That's not how it works, okay? Because you probably did a lot of things that you're now gonna go deactivate. This is a decision you primarily wanna make at the beginning of a build. So when you're at the beginning of a build, decide, and it's done in my blueprint, right? My blueprint install, if you've watched my video on creating blueprints for yourself so you can one-click deploy new dev environments, my blueprint already has all of this always. It's always the same setting. So I know what's not able to be used and what is able to be used. And then I will say this, I know it's very important, okay? The auto suggest, if I go over to the builder here and add something and you get this auto suggest list, right now it auto suggests classes that have been deactivated by Pro Mode. In the next update, hopefully the next update, this required a lot of JSON refactoring in the back end, which is, I think, almost solidified. It's now going to remove classes from auto suggest. So if you have turned off margin classes, it will not auto suggest them here. I know that causes a confusion and people end up using class and like it's not working and they forgot that they turned it off and, or activated pro mode or whatever. So now it's gonna remove that from the auto suggest. Okay, hopefully that answers your question on pro mode. If there's anything that's unclear about pro mode, then definitely ask again with more specificity. Okay. And that goes to say, all of your question asking, guys, it's just like CSS. Specificity matters, okay? Be specific with your questions. Sometimes people ask very general questions and then I'm not really sure how to answer. Justin says, niching down streams for our benefit, or do you like just hanging out with us all, Kevin? I mean, I do love hanging out with you guys, but I also think it's very important to niche down the streams. Okay, can you talk a bit? Oh, we did that one. Yep, we don't want to put that one up. Okay, question. What do you mean we should not use pre-built elements in any builder? You mentioned this in the last WDD. It's a good question. It's not specifically related to automatic CSS, but I can go ahead and, because it's not a hard one to answer. So if I go down here and choose something like, icon box right here. This is a pre-built element, right? Notice in the structure panel, well, let's count the items. There's a wrapper, that's 1. There's an icon, that's 2. There's a heading, that's 3. There's a text element, that's 4. I should see 4 elements in the structure panel. Instead, I see 1 element. This is what I call a walled garden element, right? You can't access it. You can't see what's inside of it, which also means you can't put anything else in it, which is the fatal flaw of these pre-made elements. And unfortunately, a lot of builders like Elementor and Breakdance and Divi, they market as like, we have 170 pre-built elements. And then none of them want to acknowledge the fatal flaw with them. That somebody that considers themselves to be a professional would never, should never use any of these elements. For this reason, there's one reason, one fatal flaw that you would never do it. If I use this icon box everywhere across a website, it could be dozens of times, could be hundreds of times on a very, very large website. And then I determine, since we can't predict the future, none of us have a crystal ball, right? We can't see, well, that's gonna be all we need. Well, it's all you need for now. But if you, develop sites with the crystal ball philosophy of like, oh, I know everything that's going to happen in the future, you're going to live a life of pain and frustration. Because for example, here, if I use this everywhere and decide, oh, this needs a ribbon, or it needs a link inside of it, or it needs a button inside of it, or it needs 2 links inside of it, or it needs another icon, or it doesn't really matter what it needs, because the answer is you can't have it. You can't add anything to this element. It is a walled garden, right? So the idea that you would use this knowing it has that fatal flaw in it, knowing that if things ever need to change in the future, this is an unchangeable situation. You can always hide stuff with CSS, but CSS can't manufacture HTML. So you're stuck. You're what we call donezo. You're donezo, okay? This is a very bad situation. So I deactivate all of these in my Bricks installs. I don't ever use them, wouldn't ever consider using them, don't recommend anybody uses them, and just ignore all the marketing hype because it's all nonsense. Okay, hopefully that answers that question. In addition to the pro mode question, what is the best way to switch to pro mode? So yeah, Michael, it's literally at the very beginning of your dev process, just hit activate on here. And you can kind of go analyze these things one by one. Like I said, I turn off Flexbox classes. You can decide for yourself if any of these, need to be turned off or on, right? Based on your particular workflow, that's completely up to you. But again, I would really, really, really encourage you to make that decision as early in the development process as possible. And guys, if you, just by turning on pro mode, like the default pro mode, that removes about half of the framework load, okay? So like you're making the framework very, very light at that point. And it can even get lighter if you turn off more of these, especially like Flex, that's a heavier one. It gets lighter and lighter and lighter the more. Oh, deprecated styles. If you're working on a brand new site, of course you don't need deprecated styles. So go ahead and turn that off. Let's say I'm never going to use corner ribbons, at least not for now. Okay, we'll turn them off then, right? And then if you decide you need corner ribbons at some point in time, it's not like the walled garden thing we just talked about. It's like, oh, well, when I started the website, I turned them off, so I can't ever have them again. It's not that kind of situation. When you actually need them, you go ahead and turn them on and save. Now it's going to load the CSS for those corner ribbons, and you can get to work adding corner ribbons everywhere. So some of this stuff can be turned off until you need it. What you just have to remember is, so that we don't get endless support tickets, is that thing is not working because I turned it off, right? If we connect those two ideas, because we get a lot of support tickets, it's like, XYZ is not working. And then it's like, did you turn it off? Oh, I turned it off. It's either they turned it off or caching. That's 98.2%. That's an actual statistical figure. 98.2% of our support tickets is I turned off the feature and it's not working, or I have 8 gazillion caching layers that I don't know how to clear, and that's causing the problem. Those are the two. Tony's laughing right now. But yeah, I mean, he's laughing and crying at the same time. But yeah, that's 98.2% of the tickets that we get. Okay, let's see. Please show how to style a frame entirely in WP code box without touching the brick settings of the CSS box. Should we keep the code that comes with frames? Okay, so this, Sylvia, I will say, ask this one on the frames specific. I will 100% do that on the frames specific Q&A. See, the thing is, there are a lot of automatic CSS users, as misguided as they might be, that still don't use frames. And so, if we dive into frames now on these ACSS, especially the beginner ones, then it's like, well, I came for ACSS and now we're talking about frames. I'm not using frames. And then, so we'll keep it on schedule here. All right, let's see. But you do have another question. When do we need to put a custom class on a frame instead of using only the frames class? Okay, that's another frames question. I thought it was going to be custom class versus utility class. We'll do that one on the frames one as well. Darius says, when is it better to use article instead of LI? I saw some frames that use the article tag. Actually, you could use both. So you could put articles inside of LIs. Right? It could be a list of articles. We try to balance the size of the DOM, because every tag that you add requires another DOM element, more or less, right? And then so we weigh that with, which does have, it eventually will have performance implications. But then we have to weigh that with semantic quality of the code and semantic accuracy of the code and all of that. And, what benefit does an article tag provide and what actually is an article? An article is not what most people think it is. Like, you would think that means like blog posts, that's an article, right? But this actually means like an article of clothing, like an item. But it's an item that can be taken out of its context and still read by the user and understood. Like a blog post. Like, you could take a blog post out of its, like a grid. Like, here's a grid of blog posts, right? These are article elements, because you could take one out of that grid and people can look at it and be like, oh, that's an article about XYZ, right? I don't need the grid and all of its surrounding context to know what this thing is. That's really what the article tag kind of means. And so a testimonial can be an article, right? A lot of things can be an article. The thing is with frames, and you have to make this decision on your own, like frames, we make like a feature card. Okay, we have a lot of cards called feature cards, and we don't necessarily know what you're gonna put in it, right? So we don't wanna have articles by default. Now the blog posts, maybe we make them articles by default. But like a feature card is generic. You could put any kind of content in it. We don't have the crystal ball. So if you're putting something in those feature cards that would make sense to wrap in an article tag, then you could probably wrap it in an article tag, which can be inside of a list item, by the way. So it could be a list of articles like I mentioned before. It's just a method, a matter of, I should say, like if I go to add a block here, okay, and then I'm gonna turn this into a grid because we're not gonna be able to see our block. There's our block right there. So let's imagine like your grid wrapper itself is the unordered list, right? So you have the UL there. And of course, it's gonna put some default padding on here. So that's the user agent style is trying to add automatic list padding, kind of annoying. And then we go to this HTML tag, which is the LI. So, and you know, in the structure panel, you would definitely want, you don't want just block, 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 block everywhere. This doesn't mean anything to anybody. Like very important to kind of tag your things or label your things. And then we're gonna put a block inside of this. Well, if we can type, it's always better if you can type. You know, web design does work the best when you can use the keyboard. This would be your article right here, which is your card, more or less, okay? And then you would change this to HTML tag article, like that. Okay, so that would end up being your structure. So instead of like if this could be my card if I didn't want the article tag, but if I want the article tag, I need another DOM elements to create the article tag, and then that becomes my card. So that can be your structure right there. Hopefully that answers the question. It's not really ACSS related, that's more HTML related, but you know, still good to know, I guess. Question, it's frames, so maybe in the interval, if not using frames elements, is there any value keeping the plugin on a client website after all the dev has been done? You absolutely, yes. Yeah, there's some frames under, well, it's mostly related to the components. If you're using the components 100%, you got to keep it installed. So slider, tabs, accordion, table of contents, modal, trigger, switcher, right? All those, you have to have frames installed for those. And you should be using those. They're better than the native Bricks components. They're more accessible than the native Bricks components. I would highly, highly recommend if you're not using the frames components to start using those. I have purposefully not marketed that side of frames very heavily because we've been focusing on getting them like really buttoned up and dialed in and out of beta and working really, really seamlessly. I'm about to unleash the marketing on the components side of frames because, you know, it's one of the, I mean, when you're talking about getting your money's worth for frames, like you already got your money's worth with all the actual frames, but then the components being on top of them, come on now. And we got a whole menu builder component coming that's gonna blow the, cause you know, the Bricks native one, not so great. But we will have a, hopefully, you know, if we can do it right, if we can execute on it really well, we'll have a very, very fantastic one. Okay, let's see here. Hey, Edward. Edward says, hi guys. Okay, question. If working on a site with many pages that will have the same primary button all over, do you recommend using a template for the button so it's easy to change globally later on? Really good question. The answer is no. Buttons are not, normal buttons, no. But we can get into some other specifics here. So I'm gonna add a section. Notice that like every question, even if it's like a beginner question or what seems like an obvious question, there's always a but. There's always a but. And that's what's so frustrating, I think, for people learning web design, learning automatics. There's so many things that we have to think about and consider. And sometimes, you know, I mentioned a minute ago how none of us have a crystal ball, right? In an ideal world, yes, a button is a component, a global component. However, Bricks doesn't have global component functionality, true global component functionality. So we can't do it anyway inside of Bricks the way that it should be done. So we have to make concessions, and we can have a little bit of a crystal ball, right? And then sometimes we just have to acknowledge that, all right, well, if we're wrong on that prediction, then life's gonna suck a little bit. But you know what? Life sucked a lot in the past as a web designer. I mean, go back to things we had to do years ago. I mean, there's a lot of suck, right, involved. And so we're trying to limit the suck as much as possible, but I don't think the suck can be completely eliminated. Anyway, let's go ahead and talk about our button situation here. So first things first, if you are a beginner, I highly recommend you stick with the action color for all action items. This is what it's designed for. We didn't have action for a while, so we were using primary, but now we have action. Action should be used for everything, right? So it's button action, not button primary. Button action should be the default, your go-to. And what I want you to notice is that that completely styles the button. Now, if I put another, button next to this, let's put another button right next to this one. So I'm gonna add a button, and this is gonna be button black, okay? So there's a black button. Notice that these two buttons, notice also that there's the default hover state is not great for this black button right here. So we're gonna go over how to adjust that and change it in just a second. But notice that these two buttons are identical except for their color. Their padding is identical. Their minimum width is identical, okay? High. So this button has a minimum width on it, right? If the text doesn't make it go longer, it's not gonna shrink down all the way to high, right? Because that doesn't look like a button anymore. It still looks like a button because it has a minimum width on it. Notice that even though it's a different button with a different class, it still has the same minimum width. There's a lot of shared styles among the buttons. And if you go down here to the Automatic CSS dashboard and you go to buttons, you're gonna see all of these shared styles right here called button defaults, right? These are all of your shared styles. If you scroll down, you're gonna see action, primary, secondary, accent, base. Every color has a set of buttons that are available to you. Now, I will say this, along with your pro mode setup that we were talking about just a minute ago, the first thing I do on every install is I go to the buttons area and I go off, 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 off. I leave black and white typically, but if I know, like, no way here's a good example. On the Automatic CSS website, base is very close to black. It's not black, but it is very close. Like it would give me a very dark button, okay? So I don't need black because if I have base that I'm using as an option, then I don't need black, right? In that situation. Again, you're making these decisions on each individual website based on what you know about the design of the website, right? Okay, so I can turn off all these button sets that I'm absolutely not using. This, yet again, lightens the framework even further, okay? So you don't have to load all these things that you're not using. Go ahead and turn them off. And again, it's not a disastrous thing. If you go to use black button and it's not working, you can just come turn it back on, right? It's nothing, there's no problem with it. Okay, so we've gotten the ones that we're not using turned off. If I look under Edit Action Button Styling, what you're gonna see are styles that are unique to the action button. They are not shared styles. Shared styles are up here because they're shared across all of these button sets, okay? So if I wanted to change, for example, my button padding, I want all of my buttons to change because I don't want, like when I go button action right here, and then button black, I don't want button black to, for some reason, be like bigger or smaller or whatever than the other button, like have rounded corners. Like that doesn't make any sense. That looks janky, right? That's not consistent. It's not good. So shared styles are a really important thing. And this is why you don't need a lot of the component type functionality because you have global control over all of the shared styling of buttons. Then you have global control over each button's independent styling. So if my action, like, actually the black one, remember I said the hover style on this black's no good because it has a white border right here. So what I want to do is I want to go down to the black button, which I turned off. We'll turn that back on. And I want to look at the unique styles for that button. And if we see hover border color is shade white, we have revealed now why that's white on hover. And we actually don't want that to happen. So let's say that my hover background color, instead of action hover, I'm gonna make that be, you could do lots of things here. Let's do base. And again, I'm customizing this black button. I can really do anything I want, right? You still want it to make sense. Like you don't want to use a background color of white on like a black button. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. So the changes you make here, you still want them to have contextual attachment to like the name of the button. But like I said, base could be very dark. Let's do shade. Let's do shade ultra, or let's just do shade dark. So that's not gonna be quite as dark, all right? So the hover background color is shade dark from shade black, so that should change a little bit. And then we want the hover border color to match the hover background color. So I'm gonna go shade dark here, so those two things match each other. And then we can look at the hover text color, shade white, that should all be good. Let's go ahead and save, okay? Now, those changes don't apply to any other button. They only apply to the black button. So I'm gonna go ahead and let's save this page. Let's view that on the front end. Notice when I hover, it's going from black to shade dark, which is slightly darker than black. And notice that the border is no longer turning white. I guess we can prove that by going like BG base light here. Okay, so now you can actually see a background color. See, there's no white border on hover anymore. So I've effectively, I have control over all of these buttons globally. And if I now watch how I round the corners. So I go up here and I go to button border styling and we look at the button radius, which is currently set to 0. Another tip for beginners, for radius, and we're actually probably gonna rework this a little bit. On a website, typically you're using the same border radius for almost everything, like a button and an image probably have the same border radius. Like, it doesn't usually look good for images to have some aggressive border radius and then everything else doesn't have an aggressive border radius or no border radius at all. Like, border radius is one of those things that just kind of, it's nice if it's consistent on everything throughout the website. And so in order to achieve that, I know we have different, types of radius. So you get small, medium, large, extra large, whatever. What I do, if you want to know what I personally do and what I recommend for managing radius, is you go to your radius, which is, I believe is an additional styling right here. Here's the radius system. And you set the base radius, which by the way is radius M. This is the medium radius size. And so let's say that I want just, nice, light, little border radius here. I don't want anything super aggressive. I'm gonna go with 0.5 rem. That's gonna be my standard radius on everything across the website. Okay, go ahead and hit save. And then we're gonna hop over and go back to our buttons. And we're gonna go to our button radius. If I want everything to be nice and consistent, according to radius M, then I just say that this is radius M now, okay? And we hit save. And now I'm gonna go back to the front end. Now, both of these buttons, remember they're different buttons. One is a button action, one is a button black. But when I refresh, both of them get the same radius. And then if I'm doing border radius on images, guess what I'm using? Radius M, radius M. I'm just using radius M everywhere. And that means everything is gonna have the exact same radius according to that value that I set in the radius settings. And so I don't really have much of a use for radius S, XS, L, XL, whatever. I actually also don't really have a use for FR card radius, which we put in frames. See, some of this stuff, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Now, we may make a change where it's like, maybe there should just be a global site radius. Because in 99% of cases, we just want the same radius everywhere. There should probably just be a radius variable and a radius class. And that's it. And that's primarily what we rely on. I don't know. We're gonna get user feedback on stuff like that. Don't worry. We're not just gonna yank stuff away from you. Okay. We will. We'll have a discussion about it. Okay. Did that answer your question on buttons? Now let's get into the butt. The butt part of the buttons. This puts the BUT in buttons, if you know what I'm saying. Okay. If I ever decide that I want icon buttons on this website instead of non-icon buttons, that's a situation where you are like, well, it'd be nice if we had some component functionality here, because then I could make that change in one area and apply it to all my buttons. But unfortunately, we don't have that. So it's kind of a non-issue anyway. But when Bricks releases component functionality, which is on the roadmap now, we will be able to make that change. And so what that would look like is we save a button component, right? And then we're able to go down and see this icon right here, where I can go just choose like a right arrow, like bracket or something. See how it added the little icon? I'm gonna go ahead and hit save. Okay, notice that the black one did not get the icon, okay? That's because this isn't a global component and there's not even possible to make it as such. I don't believe, maybe they're limited global component functionality does apply to buttons. I could be right. I haven't tested it because first time I looked at it, I was like, that's dog doo-doo. And the real component functionality is not actually there. It may cover small use cases like this. I'd have to go test it, but ultimately that's what you would want to do. Now, the problem with that is, you wouldn't be able to add them from here. You would have to add them as, well, yeah, actually you still can't do it. You still can't do it because you got to add those, I don't think, because you got to add them as a template. I don't actually know how it would work. I would have to go play around with that. Let me see. Let's save this as a global element. What does this do? Okay. So then, I don't even know how to insert those global elements. They're at the bottom right here, right? Okay, let's see how this works. Okay, so that's technically now a global element. So now if I go icon up, see how they both change to icon up? Now, do I still have there's your fatal flaw right there. That's the fatal flaw. So now, okay, hey, congrats, Kevin, you made a button component. Do you want them to ever be different colors from each other? Sorry, okay? See, this is what I mean. When people are like, there is a global component. I'm like, no. This is the Crockford's Law situation, right? Shout out to Tony Crockford, part of the team. Crockford's Law says you get 90% of the way into something before you realize the missing 10% is a big fucking 10%, okay? This is the missing 10%. Like the fact that I can't now have this one have a different class from this one over here. Yeah, it's I don't even know. Can you even? No, you can't. Like, aren't they both going to become secondary? Yeah, you can't even use the built-in style selector. Yeah, because now what you have to do is you have to unlink it. Well, once you unlink it, then you're free to make some changes. Okay, button black, right? We want a button black. Hey, look at that. That's fantastic. But check this out. Now on my little global component right here, I decide that we don't want the icon anymore. Guess which one still has the icon? The one you unlinked. Because why? There is no true global component functionality. So this is the message I've been trying to get out there and spread like this. Why this is actually quite important. My estimation would be, a 50-page website might have, I don't know, 400 buttons on it. 400 buttons, and then Bev is like, we really need an icon in those buttons. I mean, is there anything else that would, make you want to jump off a bridge faster than that situation? With global components, you'd be like, hey, Bev, no problem. We got yourself a button right here, and we just apply it to 400 buttons all at once. That would be absolutely fantastic. But we don't have that, Okay. Let's go ahead and move on. Hopefully that answered your question, Paige. Cello says, I just turned on the Pro mode in my Blueprint installation, and I see that a lot of classes don't work anymore. 100%. 100%. Manny says, have you checked Bricks Maven? It looks very well done and using automatic CSS. Under some categories, they have more frames. I have not personally checked it out. I just put this in a Facebook comment. Edaware is a great guy. I've used Edaware as a designer in the past for various things, him and his team. They released Bricks Maven before Frames even existed. They were basically the first design set available for automatic CSS. He had my full support when he did that. He's an ACSS affiliate. He studies my videos. He studies web design. He tries to cross every T and dot every I the way that I do. And so, I don't think you can go wrong when you do a Bricks Maven purchase. A lot of people use both. The one thing that it doesn't have, objectively, is the components. So Frames has all the accessible dynamic components, not these kind of components that we were just talking about. I'm talking about the accordion type stuff. Of course, when we do get global component functionality in Bricks, those things will also become global, like true global components. But yeah, I like what he's doing. Much more than, there's lots of design sets for Bricks. It's a lot of them are an unmitigated disaster. If you're gonna go with one, Go with Frames or Bricks Maven. I haven't really seen any others that I would give my stamp of approval on. Okay, all right, but Breakdance also uses classes, and it gives you the possibility to define your own classes. Ruben shows this in his video. Is it a political decision? I don't know what this is related to. Oh, is it possible to use ACSS with Breakdance? Like you said, Breakdance does have class functionality. It is not a class-first builder. That's different from a utility-first builder, okay? Class-first builder means that you're encouraged to use classes for things, like custom class. Doesn't matter what kind of class it is. They hide the classes panel away a little bit, and that really, really, really makes workflow bad. If we were, now, we gotta also talk about how we, okay, on the new Automatic CSS website, you're gonna see something called True Builder Integration, right? TBI, True Builder Integration. Something that we came up with it, so we might as well trademark it, right? But it's an important distinction because out of the box, frameworks will work 90% with most page builders, right? Unless the page builder just does things absolutely atrociously. Because Automatic CSS is designed to work with proper HTML. So if a builder has proper HTML, like Breakdance has very clean HTML, well, if we're giving, accolades, right? Breakdance does have very clean HTML. So Automatic CSS technically should work 90% out of the box with it, as any framework would. Crockford's Law, though. What is Crockford's Law, guys? We need a Crockford's Law t-shirt. You get 90% of the way into a project before you realize the 10% that's not there, and that 10% is a massive freaking headache. And so if we just said, hey, we have ACSS, go use it in whatever builder, we integrate with everything. That's what we could actually say that, like other frameworks. So we integrate with everything. But then there's Crockford's Law. And we don't want Crockford's Law to exist. We don't want you to have massive headaches. We don't want you to ever jump off a bridge face first. We don't want these things for you. We don't want you to live that life, as we say. So what we do is we actually have true builder integration, which means when we say that it is integrated with a builder, it's 100% integrated with that builder. So we go through every element, we go through all of the HTML structure of everything that builder does, and we make sure that Automatic CSS is working seamlessly with that builder. I'll give you a perfect example. If you open Oxygen in a lot of and you're using another framework, and you open Oxygen or Breakdance, put a grid class on the section element and see what happens. The whole section will break. The whole section will break. Because that's part of the 10% that's not actually working. Why? Well, it's Oxygen's fault. Oxygen has an inner wrapper in that section that you can't access. And that inner wrapper becomes a grid item. And then everything is technically in a grid item that's stuffed in one corner of the grid, resulting in a broken layout. This is very common. Automatic CSS, now switch. Go to Automatic CSS and put a grid class on a section in Oxygen. And what do you have? A working grid, exactly as you would expect. Because we have an override for our Oxygen installs that targets the hidden inner wrapper of the section element and applies the grid there instead of to the actual section wrapper itself. And so this is a perfect example of true builder integration. So while you can go probably use Breakdance right now and Automatic CSS for a lot of things, there's gonna be 10% of stuff that does not work right. And until we do the legwork of making it truly integrated with Breakdance, we don't recommend it, right? And when we do integrate it, then we will recommend it. Just like we're doing with Quickly right now. We're currently in our true builder integration phase with Quickly, which is a lot of work. And so we can't market to everybody saying, hey, we work with everything, like a lot of people do, but they're just lying to you, right? They don't actually work 100% with every builder. And we have to move slower. But the upside is when you use Automatic CSS with a builder that is supported, it's gonna work seamlessly out of the box. And if something doesn't work, we have a commitment to making it work, right? We're not just gonna be like, oh, well, the builder's doing that the wrong way. I mean, you see like, the bricks, automatic max with 100% thing. I got a whole ticket, a whole discussion, a whole thread. I'm trying to convince Thomas to do this, this, and this. because we don't want that limitation. We don't want that limit. We're committed to not having any limitations for users. We don't want a user to have a single headache, a single roadblock, a single thing that doesn't work. That's our goal. Our goal is 100% functionality in supported builders. That's what you get with automatic CSS. So you can go use it in Breakdance, but it's not going to work 100%. And I'm considering doing this. I think it would be fun. I think it would be entertaining if, when we do the builder integration with Breakdance, we give Breakdance, much like we did with Gutenberg, a class-first workflow. I think that would be fun. That would absolutely be fantastic. And then we could do some videos showing a class-first workflow in Breakdance. And then, I think a lot of people who use Breakdance would come to love a class-first workflow. And then we'll just see what happens after that. Okay. All right, let's go to Martin. Why does Breakout Full add a horizontal scroll to my pages? My gosh, this is just a fantastic question. Martin, this is a fantastic question. Okay, let's add a image in here. And let's get these nice concert goers on the page here. Okay, so what we're looking at right here is an image that is not in a container, so it's full width, except the section that it's in has a gutter. Now, I could also put this image inside of that container right there, and I'm gonna zoom out so you guys can get a better understanding of this. And so this is being contained to the content width of the website. And you might be in a situation, right, where you, let me go back into the builder here. Let's add another container, and let's put this container up here. And where did it go? There it is. Why did its outline disappear? Okay, so then I'm gonna put like a heading in here, and I'm gonna put text in here, okay, and save, and we'll just go back to the front end. Notice that the text and the image are in perfect content width alignment. Sometimes, because you don't want everything to look like a giant, tunnel, you want to create some fluidity in the design. Bev would describe this as less boxy, right? You want certain elements to, stretch out their legs and, do some other things. Like we want this image maybe to go all the way to the edges of the screen. Well, the problem is that is currently contained inside of a container. And you're like, well, just take it out of the container. Okay, well, I just take it out of the container and I hit save and then we go look. And it's still, well, that image is not, let me do 100% width on this image. It's just trying to be its current size, okay? There we go. So look, it still won't, it's 100%, it still won't touch the edges. Why? Because sections have a physical gutter. And so we have two options here, right? Well, I could remove the gutter, all right? And I'm gonna show you two ways. There is no right and wrong here, okay? This is like, it comes down to preference and efficiency. And I guess we can show some situations where you might choose one method over the other method. There's now two methods here because of Automatic CSS 2.6. Before there was only one method, which was Breakout. But now you have two methods to choose from. Okay, so what a lot of people would do in the past though is they would clear out the gutter. So they would say, no more inline padding. And then we go look at this and that appears to work, but that's actually a mistake. That's a beginner mistake, okay? Let's just do a pop quiz. I like pop quizzes. Let's do a pop quiz. Why is this a beginner mistake? What is going to go wrong now? Now that I've done that, what is going to go wrong? Does anybody know? We'll look at some other comments while the pop quiz answers stroll in. There's a 10, 15 second lag here. This is why your philosophy is so extraordinary. Please do Breakdance and ACSS. I'd love to see the video in Lewis's comments. Yes. Why is it named Shade White and Shade Black and not just black and white? Because there is a black and a white. That's a really good question, Martin. We're gonna come back to this. Another really good question. There we go. So Edward wins. On mobile, version will be a problem. Yeah, okay, so let's take a look at what happens now. You can never forget about mobile, right? I remove the gutter, which the gutter doesn't affect anything on desktop anyway. I remove the gutter, now watch what happens. Oh, we have a collision. Uh-oh. Warning, should be going off in your head, right? Collision. So yeah, now no gutter, bad things happen, right? Okay, so then we realize, now, how do you fix that? Is there a way to, in ACSS 2.6, you can fix that. right? This is the situation where you go content with safe, okay? And you hit save, and then we go here and check that out. Now you have a gutter where there previously was no gutter, and that's fantastic. So that's one way to approach it. Or, since you asked about breakouts, we have to answer the question about breakouts. We don't clear out the padding. We leave the gutter. The gutter stays, and we just tell this image, hey, just break yourself out. Like do whatever you need to do to get to the edges of the screen. Ignore the gutter, like go over the gutter, go around the gutter, go under, whatever you need to do. Just get to the edges of the screen, right? So we have this class called Breakout Full. You're breaking it out of its container. Whatever's trying to contain it. Doesn't matter if it's in another container, right? Whatever, nothing can contain it. It's gonna break out and it's gonna be the full width. Now you have Breakout XL, which will go bigger, but it'll break out of whatever container it's in and become bigger. Full will take it all the way to the edges of the screen. Okay, so I hit save, and then we have our situation here. So this is broken out. Remember, this section still has a gutter, right? There's the gutter right there. But the image is reaching all the way to the edge of the screen. Now, on my screen, you'll notice there is no horizontal scroll bar. There is no scrolling left and right. Some browsers, and it's actually, I think, devices, the underlying device technology that's running the browser, decides, it's a quirk, it's a known quirk with VW units, 100 VW. 100 VW says be 100% of the viewport width. Well, on a page with a vertical, you see that vertical scroll bar right there? That vertical scroll bar, this is a very technical answer, but it's important to understand. That vertical scroll bar is about 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever pixels wide. And that means that this image is going behind that scroll bar. Anything that's 100 VW is going behind that scroll bar. And some browsers interpret that as hidden content. And they say, well, since there's 5 pixels of content over there that the user can't see because of the scroll bar, we're gonna add a horizontal scroll bar so that they can go left and right. But then you're like, would you go right 5 pixels? That doesn't help anybody. And nobody wants a horizontal scroll bar. And this isn't actually hidden content. It's the browser misinterpreting 100 VW with elements, okay? And it's an undesirable situation, but it doesn't happen on a lot of browsers. It only happens on certain devices, certain browsers. Now you can get rid of this by doing overflow hidden. You can hide overflow. Then the browser's like, well, you said to hide the overflow, so that, hidden stuff doesn't matter anyway. And so it doesn't display, but you don't always want overflow hidden, right? It's a situation where the browser technology needs to be fixed. Now we also have DVW units coming, dynamic viewport width units. That will fix the situation as well, but those aren't fully supported yet, so we can't use them. It's just an anomaly. It's an annoying anomaly. It's gonna happen in some browsers, okay? If you can use overflow hidden without any other ramifications, then overflow hidden should fix it. Okay, let's go up. Let me go back to where we were. Okay, let's see. When do we need to put a custom class on? Okay. Finding my spot again, because I had to scroll down. Always going to find a pre-build that never fits with what I actually wanted in the first place. The cheat sheet is no longer on the website. What is the workaround? We still have the Google Drive version of the cheat sheet available. We're refactoring all the JSON, and then once that's refactored, we're going to use that JSON, I think, to deploy the new cheat sheet on the website, making the cheat sheet much more maintainable and always in perfect sync with the actual automatic CSS framework, right? Before, we had to update the cheat sheet manually after the framework, and it was resulting in some discrepancies. When we have JSON powering the framework, JSON powering the cheat sheet, there is no discrepancy between the two. That's what we're pushing and working towards right now. It's a lot of work, okay? But that's why we're getting rid of the old cheat sheet method and going to this new method for the cheat sheet. Some time ago, you stated that the OWL classes were going to be deprecated. Will they be? They have been deprecated for some time now. They are, in fact, deprecated. Let's see here. Okay, Tony says it's almost always caching. All right, what is the best way to use automatic CSS when you have sections that are full page? What dimensions are best for this? VW, VH, VMin, or VMax? I mainly struggle to get it working on mobile. You mean when there's no content width of the website? I guess that's what you're saying. There's no content width of the website. If I were you, I would at some point ignore gigantic screens, right? Like trying to support a device from 2,700 pixels all the way down to 320 pixels requires a lot of good technique and a lot of management, okay? And a lot of checking and double checking and triple checking things. And it's honestly, it's just work that I don't really want to do, right? So what I would say is just at least choose a content width of some type. Like maybe it's 1920. So people on a 1920 monitor, big monitor, you know, they get a full experience still. But somebody on a gigantic monitor, they don't, you know, their experience ends at 1920, basically. I would still choose a content width for your website. And then just keep using all of your clamps and all of that. You just use big maxes, right? And normal mins. And the normal min value is gonna take care of everything on mobile. And then that bigger max value is going to go up to that greater content width of the website. Now, there are ways that you can 100% do it. Like on the new Automatic CSS website, the menu is a good example of this, right? So if I click on this, that text right there is a good example. That's not using clamps. That's not using like, you know, the H1 variable, or this is not a size in Automatic CSS. This is using, I mean, we can inspect it here. If I remember back, let's see. I don't even know what it's on. We can't look at the computed size because, is it on? No, it's probably on this A, if I were to guess. Yeah, it's using a max. Here, let me zoom in. I know you guys, my head's probably in the way too. Let me dock this over here. Let me zoom, zoom, zoom. Okay, let me pull this up here. You would want to do something like this, okay? And this just goes to show you, right? Like, you know, when you're using automatic CSS, you shouldn't feel trapped into like, I have to do it with automatic CSS. I have to do it with a variable. No, you don't. Like, you can do anything you want at any time, okay? Automatic CSS is just there to help you with all the stuff that you want it to help you with. In this case, I was like, I'm going rogue. Like, I'm just going to do my own thing. And so this uses a max function, which says, hey, be 5 VW, which on a large screen is very large text, right? And on a small screen, it's small text because it's 5% of the viewport width. But it also says never be smaller than 3 rem. Okay, if you don't know what a max function is, a max function chooses the maximum value of what you're giving it. So you're saying, here's 2 values, choose the bigger one, which effectively sets a minimum, right? So it's gonna choose VW almost all the time, 5 VW, which is gonna be very big text. But if 3 VW, like if 5 VW ever gets smaller than what 3 rem calculates to, it's gonna choose 3 rem, which becomes your minimum. 3 rem becomes your effective minimum here. So this text I know will be 5 VW, but it'll never get smaller than 3 rem. And so it just happens to look good, right? So look at like its size right now, right? That is significantly smaller. That's still 5 VW, right? But on a large screen, look what happens. 5 VW now is suddenly very, very, very large. So you use a technique like this and you're good to go. Again, not really ACSS related, just showing you what you can, what you can do. And I'm not like, oh, well, I'm using automatic CSS, so I can't do anything like that. Like, you can do whatever you want at any time. There's no limitation. I'm not affiliated with ACSS or Kevin. That's just what he said in the past. Okay, that was to something else. I don't know. Okay, I answered the horizontal scroll question. What is the proper way to get support? Is it a ticket or in the community? I would go to the community because you're typically in the community going to get more answers faster, right? Like, there's more people in the community who can jump in, and we have official support people in the community, right? Tobias, Tony, like, these people are in the community answering questions there. You can get support by emailing hello@automatic.css.com or hello@getframes.io. That's like an official support ticket, but we're gonna process those. Like we go community first, okay? So we put the most time and effort into the community, and then we're also checking the tickets as we can get to them. So I would say your best route is to ask in the community. Plus, when you ask in the community, your question becomes searchable. And the community search has been dramatically improved, okay? So your question, the answers become searchable and findable, and they're accessible to everybody else who may have a similar question. Whereas if we answer your question in a support ticket, nobody else can see it and they don't know. The time you do want to send in a support ticket, obviously, is when you need to give us login credentials for something. Wouldn't recommend posting those in the community. Okay, even though everybody in the community is, great people, fantastic. I'll just do the Trump thing right now. Fantastic people. They're all fantastic, right? Don't post your credentials in the community, okay? All right, question. Should we put BEM classes on sections that aren't gonna be used again or use variables on the ID level? Should we put BEM classes on sections that aren't gonna be used again? Okay, good question. So let's talk, definitely we should dive into that. Definitely something that beginners probably wonder all of the time. Okay, so I don't want to use frames to do this. I'm just thinking of a good example here. Well, I mean, you have, it's actually you're giving me two options, but there are three options, right? So a typical section like this, let's say this is a one-off section. I'm not gonna reuse this section ever again. So would it make sense to put a BEM class on it? No, not really. However, I have said, when in doubt, what's the statement from hey, all you PB101 people, what's the statement? What is it? What's the call out? When in doubt, BEM it out. So if you don't know what the right answer is, you can't go wrong with BEM. You might do something a little inefficient with BEM, but you're not wrong, okay? So when in doubt, BEM it out. But if we already know, we're not gonna use it, I don't need my crystal ball, we're not gonna use this section really again in this manner. Now the question becomes, do I style it the ID or do I use utility classes? This would be a good use of utility classes. However, the next question along the line is like, it's one of those like little flow charts, right? Did you do this? So we'll go down here. Did you turn off the classes in Pro Mode? If you turned off utility classes that you need now suddenly the utility class option is not an option. So this goes to your question page of, well, do I make a BEM class that's gonna mostly be useless, or do I style at the ID level? And the answer is, you style at the ID level. ID level styling is not a no-no. It's a no-no when you should be doing something else. But if you are truly styling a unique element, that's the whole point of ID, is that it's unique, right? So if it is, the only discrepancy is it truly a unique element? If it is truly a unique element, there is nothing wrong with styling at the ID level. If there is a chance that this is gonna be used again somewhere else, you probably don't wanna style at the ID level, okay? But yeah, don't be afraid if you know that this is a one-off thing. Like let's say, see, I said a second ago, right? BG, base, light. I know I want these utility classes at my disposal. So even in Pro Mode, they stay on. I know that section padding, right? Or pad section, what, L, maybe XL, we can choose any of those. Let's just do L. Made that bigger, right? Let's say though, just for illustration, that I turned off the section padding classes. I don't have them at my disposal. So I can't just slap a utility class on here. I'm not gonna go through the trouble of making a useless BEM class. I'm just gonna go down here to the padding box on the ID level and go section space L, okay? And yes. Oh, it already is. It's not updating in Bricks. Is Bricks doing this again? Let's go check this out. I'm still having, I don't know if you guys are, well, it normally doesn't happen on the, let's try anything in here. I wanna see if do we just have a disconnect? No, that's working, okay. All right, well yeah, I would just go in here at the ID level and do it here, just like you see me doing with these variables right now. And again, it's okay to do that at the ID because you would have used a utility class anyway, right? And it's a unique situation. There's really no problem there. And you're still technically hooked in. Those variables, their values globally can still be changed and adjusted. Like if I change my spacing ratio, that's still gonna update even though it was done at the ID level because it's using a token, right? So you're still, even if you're styling at the ID level, you're still using tokenized styles, which still gives you way more global control than if I came in and said something, what you definitely don't wanna do. Here's what you definitely don't wanna do, like 120. Or something like, use some raw value that's completely disconnected from anything else that we're doing. That would be a no-no. That you don't want to do. But if you use a variable here, still way better. Even though you're doing this at the ID level, still the best situation possible because it's tokenized. Okay, I know most are here for website front-end building, but when will you build something back-end, like a page with menu on the left UI-ish, like a page with menu on the left UI-ish? Wouldn't a menu still be on the front end? Or are you talking about like an app situation? Or like, I need more clarification. BG, I need more clarification on this. I'm not quite sure what you're referring to. Let's see here. Okay, no, that's to somebody else. This question is not related. You want to skip it? Okay, you talk about contact. Oh, yeah, this is a agency. This is a business question. So we'll do those on the WDD Live tomorrow. Well, usually on WDD Live. You can ask those kind of questions. Have you looked at Motion Page plugin? It's very useful when creating animations based on CSS selectors. Considering ACSS is a great CSS framework, might be good to have more animated sites. Yeah, I'm using it on the new Automatic CSS website. That's actually what does the, no, we don't want to go to the dashboard. That's actually what does the animations in the menu right there. Those animations are Motion Page. There's an animation right there, the stars. There's an animation right there, a scroll animation revealing the CTA. I am a fan. I think Motion.page is a good app. Is it not possible to have ACSS button styling override Bricks defaults, as in we have to add a utility class to override? Ah, got it. You mean when I am in the builder, let's clear that out. Let's go section and I add a button. You want that button to automatically be the action color, have all the action styling. I think that's what you're asking, right? So that we don't have to go up here and type in button action. If that was possible, I would have already done it because I've already felt the same exact sentiment, right? It's not that I enjoy adding a button action class to every button that I add to the page. The problem is when we are going to style something automatically, because now if Bricks, this is another builder complication, right? Why is that button yellow? Why is it the way that it is? Why does it already have padding, right? Because Bricks is already attempting to style it by default, okay? So there's gonna be a conflict between framework and builder, or even, your custom CSS and builder and how things are done, right? In order for us to make that look like button action by default, we have to style it with the style sheet in the back end, which is not a problem. But because Bricks already tried to style it and they used specificity in their styling, we have to use specificity in our styling to override it, which then means all the other utility classes become useless because we have to load our styles after Bricks, which means that when you go in here, if you tried to do something in this panel right here to something that was already styled, you wouldn't be able to do it. It would basically break a lot of these input fields because there's already more specific CSS loading later. Even if it's not even more specific, just the fact that it's loading later because we had to override what Bricks was already trying to do, it's gonna render all these things obsolete. Then if we, the same issue happens in reverse. If you go up here to theme styles and you go to button, wherever this is, right here, and you do a bunch of default styles in here, now your utility classes won't work. Like if you want the button black, it probably is not going to work because these styles in bricks are going to be more specific and they're going to load after our other utility button classes. There's a lot of like, where does the CSS load? Which CSS is more specific? There's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. So the safest answer was just leave it the way it is and let people use the button utility classes. And then there's no limitations, there's no problems, there's no issues whatsoever. But it's stuff like that that takes a lot of consideration, and it actually there's a lot of work. As an example, probably hours went into that exact question of, can we style this by default without breaking other things? And the only way to figure out the answer to that is to actually do the work to automatically style it and then do a bunch of testing and all this other stuff. And we did that very, very early on. And we determined that it's too dangerous. It's not safe enough. And so we're not going to do it. And so you just take those hours of work and light them on fire, basically, right? There's a lot of that kind of stuff that goes into, making all this stuff work. Can you alphabetize the settings, pretty please? Alphabetize the settings, alphabetize the settings. In the dashboard, like here, right here. Okay, I mean, there is probably an argument on both sides for this. Like, what's the most important? We try to put the most important stuff first, right? Is there a good example here? Yeah, like right here. Now, base spacing happens to start with a B, so it would come first anyway. But, let's imagine for a second that, this wasn't called base spacing or something. Foundational spacing, I don't know, something that would put it down here based on your alphabetical order, right? Well, it doesn't make sense really to choose scales until I've set like base values for something. Like I want to set my base values first, then I want to determine a scale that's going to manipulate that base value, right? Same thing down here, right? Desktop happens to come before mobile, but still, I typically want to get my desktop stuff figured out, then my mobile stuff. It's hard to find a really good example, but there could be situations like that, like this custom button text size thing, okay? Actually, alphabetically, you would have the button padding come first. Why would I be choosing my button padding first when I haven't even chosen, what my size is gonna be? My button padding actually is based on my size, considering I'm using M units here. It's just, I don't know. It's like, we could do alphabetical, but then would stuff not make sense in the order? Because then, for sure, 50% of people are going to be like, thank you for alphabetizing that. But the other 50% are going to be like, it doesn't make sense that this comes before that. It's one of those situations where I don't think we can win. I just don't think we can win. If we go one way, 50% of the people are going to hate it. And if we go the other way, 50%. So it's just going to be done the way that I think it should be done. So then you can just hate me, which is fine. Which I'm used to that. I mean, you could just hate me. But at least you're not arguing with each other, right? Okay, let's see. Sheldon Harding, is tooltips coming back to ACSS? Also with animation becoming as well, for example, button and menu animations. Good question. Tooltips will be coming to Frames, not to Automatic CSS. This is something that's better done with an actual builder component. So like when you go up here to modal, I don't have it turned on. Let's go back in here and let's go to Automatic CSS, go to Frames, on, like these. I mean, you don't have to, well, I guess this is a beginner one, right? So we'll go show exactly what I mean. So you go up here and you add a modal, right? There's the Frames modal right there. You drag it on the page. It's got a lot of stuff that comes with it, a lot of functionality, a lot of settings panels, a lot of stuff, right? It's better to do a tooltip like this than it is to do with like pure CSS utility classes or anything like that, right? I would rather give people a tooltip component that they can slap onto the page and work with than trying to do it with CSS. There is a lot, and this is another area where I have lit probably 20 hours of work on fire. Accessibility related to tooltips. Most tooltips are not accessible. If you want them to be accessible, if you want to cross T's, dot I's, if you want to really nail tooltips, it requires a lot of work, thinking, especially if you want to make them work for lots and lots and lots of people and not just one specific application, it takes a lot of work and time and attention. And so I have all of the underlying stuff built. We just need to put it into a component form, right? So it's not relying on like utility classes and things like that. So that's your answer. See, it's one of those situations where you could already have tooltips and I could advertise that we have tooltips, but the only way that we could have done that already is to have some half-assed implementation of it. Like every other implementation of tooltip that most people, encounter. But we just kind of refuse to do that. We're like, no, we're gonna do it right. We're gonna cross every T and dot every I, and we're not gonna release it until we know that it's done right as we can make it. Let's see. Question, an idea actually. A scanner that goes through your post pages CPT and checks if an ACSS style is used so you can turn off styles without danger. Everybody asks this question. It's like the most commonly asked question. The CSS, I'm currently doing an audit, obviously, of the new Automatic CSS website. And we're always looking for ways to improve performance and yada, yada, yada. And if you're using Pro Mode and you've already turned off all the stuff that you're not actually using, you've already done a lot of this work. You've already done a lot of the optimization work, right? It is not particularly safe to try and scan for actively used classes and then remove classes that are not being used. Because you have to, especially in a WordPress environment, this is much easier to manage in a closed dev environment. But I mean, think about this. Somebody might be using WP Codebox. Somebody else might be using this thing over here. Somebody else might be using some obscure child theme thing. And you're asking this tool, this automated tool, to just try to find every instance of where this thing might be used. And then, if it can't find it, it's like, oh, well, it must not be being used. But it doesn't really know 100% of the time. And you know what the third, so we talked about caching. We talked about user turning things off. The third thing is I have a plugin that's removing unused styles and it's removing styles that I'm actually using. Well, imagine that. The automated tool couldn't find every instance of the thing and it didn't have 100% match. And now you have problems, right? It's not, it's not that safe. And so it's better for you to be very intentional in your builds, turn off all the stuff that you're not using. And then, we will build in more granularity for sure, so you can turn off more things. For example, transparencies. We have ultra dark transparencies, normal transparencies, and light transparencies. That's 4 groups of transparencies per color, okay? There could be a situation where you're like, well, on my base color, yeah, I use a lot of those. I use almost all those, but on action, not really. Or my primary color, not really. Okay, so you should be able to go in and turn off dark, ultra dark, whatever ones you're not using, go turn those off. That's kind of the granularity that's going to be added for sure, because we recognize a need for that. But it's just, in our estimation, number one, there's 2 arguments. Number one, it's not safe to automated remove classes like that. Number 2, it's like so much danger for such little upside. Like, the actual performance you're gonna squeeze out of that is very small compared to so many other things, right? Like the minute, what I'm having trouble with on the new Automatic CSS website, trust me, I have way bigger fish to fry, okay, than some unused CSS. Way bigger fish to fry. Like the fucking jQuery that has to load all over the place for easy digital downloads and the affiliate tracking and all this other stuff that was built in like 2015 and they haven't, managed to get rid of jQuery yet. That's another thing. The YouTube embeds. YouTube destroys a page, right? So anytime you throw a YouTube video on there, you've done way more damage than some unused CSS, right? You have, I pull up people's sites all the time. They got 3 megabyte images up in the hero section. My God, and they're worried about unused CSS. They're worried about saving like 8K on unused CSS when they got a 3 megabyte image in the hero section. This kind of stuff, right? It's little fish. It's little fish when there's so many big fish. You put Google Tag Manager on a site. You're throwing Google Analytics on there. I got this little Help Scout widget. This stupid Help Scout widget, right? Like, that kind of stuff is doing way more harm to page performance than some unused CSS. So I think people are way too focused on this. It's not that big of a deal. You can look at the network requests when you load an ACSS site that's using pro mode and has all the stuff that we're not using turned off, and it's transferring like 18K, right? It's transferring like 18K of data, which by the way gets cached. And so, you know, you're serving 18K of cached data, and they're like, "Wow, I want it to be 12K." It's just we're arguing over peanuts at this point, right? There's just way bigger fish to fry, in my estimation. If there wasn't any danger to doing it, then I would be all for it, right? But I know that when we build in the auto removal of unused styles, and then it's not going to be 100%, you know, match, and then broken things are and then we're gonna have support tickets all over the place. It's just gonna be another nightmare. So I don't know. You're free to use the automated tools if you want. There's plenty of them. I'm just telling you, they're not all that safe. Is there a setting on ACSS to set radius for images, or do I still have stuff to use WP Codebox for that? Is there a setting on ACSS to set radius for images? That's probably something I would do up here. I haven't personally done it, but now that you mention it, see this image right here? Okay, now what are we doing here? I haven't even looked at this section, honestly. So now I'm just a little confused. Element, image, and all of my settings are for icons. That I don't know. I can't tell you what's going on here. I would assume that these mean images. Then you could do something like border, and you could come in and you could radius M this. And then presumably all of your, does anybody else know what we're looking at here? What exact, I've never seen this section before, and it's clearly, what's going on here. But let's add an image and see if anything happens. Okay, grab that in, another concert. We're big on concerts today. Well, clearly that does not have a default radius. And I wouldn't expect it to, you know, because it's said I was doing something with an icon. That's a little confusing. Is that a bug? Does anybody know what's going on there? I don't know. But assuming that this actually applies to images, this is probably where you would want to go and do it. And just use an ACSS variable like I just showed right here. And then presumably it would now, you know, does it affect figure tags? Does it apply overflow hidden? I mean, there's always a but, right? There's always a but. To make sure that they crossed all T's and dotted all I's. That's a Crockford's Law situation, right? You think you're setting a border radius on images, and then you come to find out later that when you wrap an image in a figure tag, suddenly you don't have a border radius anymore. That kind of, you know, did they think it all the way through? As we look at it right now, they didn't even get past step one, which is we're styling images and not icons. So that's unfortunate. Okay. Can you talk a bit about shadows and creating custom shadows in ACSS versus vanilla bricks, or if we can use a calc function for those? My timer's going off, which means we're out of time for today, but I am going to answer this question and maybe one or two more, just because, you know, we gotta ease our way out of the stream. Okay, so custom shadows in ACSS versus vanilla bricks, or if we can use a calc function for those, or any way to manipulate them. Okay. Good question about shadows. Let's do this right here. Let's add a div. We're going to do a div here. And we're just going to go give it a width of 200 and a height of 200. And we're just going to let it chill right there. So first and foremost, you have box shadow classes if they're turned on, right? So you have box shadow L and M and XL and all of that. Notice when I apply it, it doesn't do anything. Why? Because I have that utility class turned off. We had pro mode turned off. Now on this install, let me go to options. I always leave all this stuff on. You might see me in my trainings have all of this stuff on. Like if I hit reset right there, it puts them all back on. That's not because that's how I build websites. It's because when I'm doing tutorials, it's really annoying when I'm like, oh, use this utility class, and then the utility class is off. So I just leave them all on for when I do training videos. Let's go ahead and refresh. And let's try it out. So we have box shadow M. So now you see that there is a box shadow around that element right there. I'll go view this on the front end. You can probably see it a little bit easier. So that's what box shadow M looks like, right? So that's an easy way to apply a box shadow. We also have box shadow variables. Okay, so I'm gonna go over here and we're gonna go down to, I was looking at this the other day. I think it's kind of a secret. I don't know. Let me see if it does work still. Let's go to box shadow. So there's X, Y, blur, and spread. Was this an oxygen that it was? See, I get all the builders. I'm in this builder and then that builder and then this builder. Let's just try it. First, let's go to CSS and make sure our variable's working. So we're gonna go root. Oh, here's the issue I was talking about just a minute ago. Look, I removed the box shadow class. Guys, what do you still see there? This is the problem I was having the other day, right? Bricks is still having trouble updating the canvas when you remove a class, or sometimes when you change styling on a class. Like, there's a box shadow, and there's no box shadow class anymore. So what I have to do, which again, workflow killer, right? I gotta refresh the builder. Now there's no box shadow. Now I can get back to work. Okay, so I'm gonna come down here and I'm gonna do box shadow, and we're gonna do, I rarely ever use these. Box shadow M, there you go. Okay, so box shadow M variable gets me the box shadow back. Now we're gonna talk about changing these, because you have full control over these in just a second, okay? But what I wanted to try, because I think there is, maybe it's for gradients. We're gonna sneak this in here, because I just want to know for my own personal benefit. Sorry, box shadow, and let's just put it in. Okay, no, it's in the color field. Color. Yes, it's right here. Raw. Is this it? Yeah, I think so. I think so. That's the cheat code right there. That's the cheat code. Because there's no way to put variables in these fields, right? So there's no way, like you obviously can't use the variables here. We don't have a variable for each of these, and that wouldn't make sense anyway. You're just making a custom box shadow at that point. Where do I reference my box shadow? Well, there's a secret backdoor, my friend. The secret backdoor is in the box shadow color field. You can drop the whole box shadow variable into the raw field of that color field, and it's gonna give you your whole box shadow. Even if your box shadow's a different color, and on and on and on. Little backdoor, little secret, okay? Little pro tip on the beginner stream. You can put your variables in there. Now, let's go, and that means, by the way, that you can easily attach your box shadow to a custom class if you want to. Okay, so let's go back into the dashboard, and let's go to additional styling, and let's go to box shadows right here. So notice there is no value. This value comes from the default style sheet. However, if you put your own value here, like you could do a little Brum AF action, like you could grab this entire, multi-layered box shadow deal right here, take out that part, only leave the values in, and save changes. You could do any kind of custom box shadow that you want here. So now that's what our box shadow looks like. Multi-layered, it's nice, it's soft, it's like all that, right? So that's really, really good. And then you can also go the step of, hey, I don't want it to be called M, I want this one to be called, and maybe, these aren't, maybe this isn't even like a black shadow, right? Maybe it's an action colored shadow, or, I don't know what you did with it. Maybe you did an inset shadow. You could name it inset, or you could name it action, or whatever. And then the utility classes change. It would be box shadow _ action, the variable box shadow action, right? It now maps to this right here. So you can create custom names for your box shadows. You can put custom values in for your box shadows. You have 3 slots to choose from. So one could be like my main box shadow. Another could be my inset box shadow. Another one could be my action box shadow, or something like that. So again, you have 3 slots to choose from: custom box shadows, custom names, whatever you want to do here. That's pretty much the process, okay? I'm gonna reset all this so I don't forget, because on the next stream, something won't work, and I'll be like, it's because I did all this nonsense on the previous stream. Okay, save. Let's do 2 more questions when we're done. 2 more questions and we're done. Justin says, remember to go upvote universal components on the bricks roadmap, everybody. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Is there a way of turning off specific shades and transparencies? I usually only use 2 or 3 of them per website. Having so many listed becomes quite overwhelming and time consuming. No, like I mentioned a minute ago, there will be ways to turn off groups of them, but I think it's too granular to turn off individual shades. And then when you decide you want to use that shade, and by the way, if you're doing like higher level web design, you're using these shades, like you're abusing the shades. Like you should be using shades. There's some people who are like, I never use the shades at all. I'm like, what are you even doing? Like, what exactly have you been up to with your web design life? Like shades are so tremendously handy, right? The transparency, so tremendously handy for so many things. You should be using them all the time. And so if you're turning off individual ones, right? Imagine you're like, I'm not using the 30% version of that color, and you turn it off. Well, number one, you just saved like 0.02 KB of like nothing, right? But next time you go to use 30, because you actually do need it, it doesn't work. And then you're gonna spend 10 minutes writing a support ticket before you realize, which is gonna take 10 minutes of our time, before you realize, oh, I turned that one particular transparency. It's way too granular. This is the problem with ultra granular frameworks, right? There's too much time managing the framework. You should just be using it. You should just be building. You should just be working. Just work, right? And it's like, yeah, there's a few options that you're not using. Ignore them. You can scroll right past them, okay? It's way worse to just try to micromanage a framework, right? Or like, I'm only using 3 shades of this color, but 4 shades of this color, but 7 shades of this color. Who's gonna remember that? Remember the 3-month rule, right? 3-month rule, you leave a site for 3 months, you come back. Are you gonna remember that you on your action, you're only using 2 shades, but on this base color, you're only using 5 shades. You go to use a shade of your action and it doesn't work. And it's like, why? Oh, I turned it off. No, now I gotta go turn it back on. It's a workflow disaster. Just leave them on. It doesn't matter that you're not using it. It's a toolbox, right? Imagine a plumber. Imagine a plumber's got his little toolkit and he gets called to a job and it's like, hey dude, I got a leak. I got a leak. Come fix my toilet, whatever. And he's like, okay. And he looks in his bag and he's like, well, won't need this tool, won't need that tool, won't need it. He thinks. Then he gets to the job and he actually needs those tools. Now he's got to drive back to his house, then drive back again. Nobody would do that, right? Take the whole tool bag with you. Just take the tool bag with you. And then you got all your tools, it's fine. And then your workflow is not all jacked up. And it doesn't really cost you anything. That's kind of the philosophy, right? Same thing with the t-shirt sizes, as Dave Foy calls them, right? Small, medium, large, extra large. You may not use XL. You may not use XS for now, but it's still good to have them. You don't wanna go turn them off. That doesn't do you any good, right? You're just taking tools out of your toolbox that you might actually need. Okay, one more question. Last one. Let's find a good one. Gotta scroll down through conversation and conversation and conversation. Let's see. There's one about tabs. That's more framesy. Move your big head. My big head's not covering anything right now. Maybe that was earlier. I gotta find a good one. Here. It's our last question. I know most are here for website front end. Okay, yeah, already asked that. There is one about animations that I can answer in a second. If I don't find a better one, I'll answer the one about animations. I like this question from Darwin. It's not really ACSS related, but it is CSS related, framework related. So let's do. I'm reading a couple others here. Alphabetizing will be less of a concern. Yeah, we do want to search. There will be a search function for ACSS settings in 3.0, 100%. We've already acknowledged that, D123. When importing from templates with images, for example, okay, that's a frames question. All right, we're going with Darwin's question. Because I think a lot of beginners would wonder this as well. How does CSS establish the priority of which styles to use if I have multiple classes within an element? Okay, so in order for this, we are gonna go to the builder and we're gonna take a look at some things here, okay? So we've got our little box, which is fantastic. Let's go ahead and get rid of our box shadow. And this is really only, there's a lot of situations where this shouldn't really apply at all. The first answer to your question is it doesn't matter what order they are applied to an element, okay? So like if I did text S on here, and we actually have to put some text in here to see it, okay? Or on this text, right? Let's get rid of this. Well, we can do it with inheritance. That's fine too. So I do text S. It makes the text smaller. Any text in here is going to be smaller. Then I put space, let's do pad M or something. We need a little padding. So there goes my padding. Does it matter what order these things are in? I mean, these are not conflicting classes, but does it matter what order they're in? No, it doesn't. It doesn't matter what order you apply them in. See, nothing is going to change here. If I remove text S and then add it back, it's going to add it second. But what you're looking at visually is the exact same effect. It's the exact same outcome. The CSS does not care what order classes are applied in, okay? Now, if we look at something like a grid, that's probably a better thing to look at, okay? Let's do a block. And then let's put a grid on here. So people might say grid 3, which establishes our 3-column grid, and then a gap of, it's already got a grid gap, but let's say I wanted the gap to be bigger, gap L, okay? And then grid M1, right? I'm gonna do this out of order. Let's do S1, but I'm gonna say grid L2, right? Well, I did the S1 before the L2. Whereas that's out of order. Shouldn't it be L2 and then like S1, right? It doesn't matter though. You could do it, and you could be a maniac like that. You could be an absolute psychopath. You could put everything in backwards if you wanted to. Doesn't matter. It doesn't, nothing matters, right? We don't need to be able to drag these around and reorder them or anything like that. None of that actually matters. If you have conflicting classes, okay, so like inside of this block, if we did 2 text sizes, all right? So now, would you ever do this? Actually, this would be a mistake, okay? And so it's probably good to highlight. All right, these have 2 competing classes. Text S was added first and the text got small. Text M was added second and the text got larger. It went back to M, okay? Let's make that L just for demonstration purposes, okay? Now watch what I'm gonna do, okay? I'm gonna remove text S, okay? And yeah, clearly I am, okay. So now we gotta go to the style sheet. All right, we'll get a little technical here. All right, so we're gonna go inspect this, all right? And we are going, we're gonna view source, not inspect. Get rid of inspection, go to view source. And then we're gonna go right into, I gotta search for this, automatic, right here, core. Text S, and we got to get past all of the successes and the secondaries and the shades. There we go, okay? See the order they're in right here? XS, then S, then M, then L, then XL, then XXL. That is their priority right there. This is defining which one is going to take precedence over the other one, okay? So doesn't matter what order they're applied in. XL, if XL and S are on the same one, the text is always going to be XL because XL is defined later in the style sheet. So it's gonna have preference, right? So you don't want 2 competing classes, but there could be a situation where you apply 2 and the second one you applied happens to come later and it's the one you want. And so you just leave the other one on there. That's bad. That's not a good situation, right? So let me go back to the builder. All right, you would want to take off. I can't make the text small because L is the priority thing, right? So I only want 1 class on here. Even though I got what I wanted. Let's say I wanted large text, but initially I started with the small text, right? Initially I did that, then I got to L, I want L. I could look at this and be like, well, I'm just gonna leave it because text S doesn't appear to be doing anything. It is doing something, right? It's instructing that text to be small, and then another instruction is coming along and overriding that. You're creating extra messiness in the output that doesn't need to be there. You should undo that. You should say, well, I'm not using S, I remove it. That's gonna keep everything nice and clean. So you don't wanna be adding, even though you're getting the effect you might want, you don't wanna be adding competing classes to elements, okay? But like I said, on a grid, M can come before S. Those aren't competing things, right? Everything in the style sheet is still in perfect order and it's gonna work just fine. Hopefully that answers that question. I know it's a little bit of roundabout. It's like beginner question, but then we're in style sheets talking about specificity. Okay. All right, we're gonna cap it at this. I gotta go work more on documentation. I do wanna say, I started something new in the inner circle. It's called co-working with Kevin. Co-working with Kevin. Basically what I do, it's not tutorial based. It is literally you come onto the stream. I think we had 70, 80 something people the first time that I did it. You know, get your coffee and I just work while I'm screen sharing. Like you get to just literally watch a live workflow. I'm not talking, I'm not walking you through shit. I'm not explaining stuff. I'm just working. And you have one of two options. You can watch if you want, and I listen to music, right? So if you happen to like my playlist and stuff like that, and you just want to hang out, listen to music and work, you can do that. Or what a lot of people do is they jump on and they use that as like co-working time, right? They work on their own stuff. And what's really neat about that, you know, I had a problem that I ran into with something. It was like the query loop and querying images from a happy files category or something. I went into the chat and I was like, hey, does anybody know how to query from a happy files category? And someone was like, oh, there's a unique element for that. It's the happy files element in bricks. And I was like, oh, thank you, thank you. So like the co-working can help you because if you run into something, you can actually go into the live chat and everybody that's co-working with you can jump in and maybe help you out, right? And we're just all having a good time. We're just hanging out, listening to music, getting work done. It's a really, really cool little segment of Inner Circle. I'm doing that once a week. So once a week, I do a co-working live session where you can just come work with me, right? Just watch me work, do some work on your own, ask people questions in the chat, listen to music. It's a really, really, really good time. Okay, I'm out, guys. Thank you for attending. The next ACSS Live will be frames specific. There were a lot of frames questions in today's chat, and I hate skipping questions. I want to answer them all, okay? Frame specific will be next week, okay? So next week, look out for a frame specific live, and I will answer all of your frames questions. Peace.